Veridian dynamics. Doing the right thing. It's important. What does it mean in business? We have no idea. We know what wrong is. Actually, no, we don't. Because we're a successful company, not some boring ethics professor. Veridian dynamics, right and wrong. It means something. We just don't know what.
Okay, so this is Same Ocean, Different Beach, Episode 2. I'm here with my Uncle Todd.
Aloha.
So Todd, you're also and someone else that I really first thought of when I thought of starting a podcast. When we first met, probably back in October at Lahiki-Ola, I was like, this guy's got some stories, and I heard you mention Big Sur, which I got to stay there for a little bit, obviously not nowhere near as long as you. So you're also an embodiment of this like same ocean, different beach kind of vibe where, you know, it's all kind of the same thing no matter where you go, especially if you're from little small towns, and that's what we're in, like Pahoa. So could you give me a little bit of your, like, I don't know, what was it like living in Big Sur in the time that you lived in Big Sur?
Oh, living in Big Sur was wonderful. We're isolated, but it's a very small community. So everybody knew everybody's business, but they respected that. And no matter how you felt about someone during an emergency, they'd help out. And you knew you could always count on them. And it was a land of gurus. Everybody there had a specialty or a thought process or ideas that were above and beyond what normal people have in that one area. So everybody had a little guru in them. Kind of occurs here on this beach. You know, the mudslide sent me from Sand Dollar to Kahana. So basically I rode the mudslide wave to get here. It wasn't my choice to leave at that time, but with the governmental non-response to the Sobranos fire, which destroyed my house and all my possessions, and then the mudslides and floods that followed, finally sent me out, but it was a great life. We stopped by the side of the highway. 10 other friends had dropped by with their drums. And this is all before the gentrification began. It's so much different now that it's not the same. It's the same land with the same energy, but the energy brought by 4 million more tourists a year definitely changed the life.
Yeah. And no, I feel that. I camped there when I was a little kid, and even when I went back and lived there, it definitely felt different. I felt like I not recognized some places, and you know, I was also young, but it definitely felt different, because I think when I went camping there was probably around the time that you were living there, especially when you first got there, because it was, you said like early 2000s, right? So pretty much just like 2 years ago.
Right after the fire, so left 3 years ago, I think. The timeline, it all messed up for me because helping to fight the fires while being threatened with arrest for going through fire lines to go save family homes with 8-ounce Red Cross water bottles, a truckload of those. Seeing all of that, and then the floods taking out roads left and right, and then the mudslides carrying objects down the mountains straight at you with the boulders, it got pretty intense.
Yeah.
And then losing the property that I was in escrow to buy. My dream was to stay there, to own that land and to farm there and be off the grid. But, you know, greed, like everything, the owner of the property wouldn't lower the price after everything had burnt. And there was no possible way for me to attain that dream. So left there and grabbed my son and his 2 boys and my wife, and we were all decided while we were in Oregon to move to Hawaii. Because I had been coming every year for quite a long time, spending a month or more here on the island, and was really comfortable here, and comfortable with the people and the diversity. And also in Puna, where I ended up, because the the wife left me for another man after 17 years, and then with the volcanic eruption a half a mile away from the house we bought here, my son and grandsons left. So I rode the wave here, and the wave ended here, and here's where I stay. And I like it because it reminds me of those times in Big Sur, because of the, I hate to use the term wild, wild west. Well, I moved from the wild, wild west to the wild, wild east. Let's put it that way. I like the fact that people take care of themselves, do things for themselves and amongst each other, and basically live without the need for authority figures to tell them how to behave.
Yeah, no, that's definitely that's definitely similar. I remember when I was there, I met the one highway patrolman that covered all 60 miles of the Big Sur coast, and the guy that I was working with basically said, "Yeah, if you have a problem, you don't call 911. You call me, and then I'll call some people." And then I met the person that he would call, you know, but it's definitely very similar here. And one thing I like about here is that they really know how to take care of the elders. Like, that's a real big thing, at least in this culture. I like to feel like is you take, you know, ideally you take care of your uncles and your aunties, and you make sure that they're okay. And one thing I think is really cool is everyone kind of stepping up, trying to see where they can help people the most throughout this whole thing, whether that be helping them get groceries, taking out their trash, you know, trying to be there for someone. And I think you're someone that's really embodied that, you know. In an undisclosed location, you know, you've given a place where people can come here and get, you know, kava, medicine, wise words of wisdom, stuff like that. And I really appreciated that you doing that during this time. And it really shows that, you know, you are that same ocean, different beach, because I'm sure you know, it sounds like you were exactly like that in Big Sur, and you're just someone that when a crisis happens, you respond. You don't really have any other way, it seems like.
Well, I've found, for me, there's two choices in, I don't like the words devastation or destruction, but there's two ways to react to large change. And that's to sit, whine about it, try to drive it away with chemicals that only make it deeper into your psyche, and create a victim for what's happening around me if I react that way. If I react with acceptance, and my goal to acknowledge what do I do with what I've been given, it changes that reaction to something more compassionate, not just for myself, but for others. And I find it really helpful to work on my acceptance anytime things like that come up, even small things. That the more I just take the present, this very present, and not the moment. Don't go to the moment. I did that in meditation, and each moment is born, lives, and dies on its own. And it's really painful waves of boom, 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 boom. So don't be in the moment. Be present. And when I'm present, I can look at things as what I've been giving, which acknowledges the gift that life is, and the gift that I have the opportunity to wake up with. And I try to keep my thinking that way. And then those things from the past don't hold emotional weight anymore in my decision making. I still have a complete and total inherent distrust of authority response during emergencies and crises, such as Cal Fire, who I watched light backfires that burnt down people's houses, because by law, Cal Fire has no written regulations regarding how they behave. So instead of fighting the fire with water and saving homes, they burnt down homes to keep the fire away from other places. So they sacrificed, supposedly for the greater good, but basically it's to drive out the people with lower incomes and create a higher tax base and continue the gentrification. But in the present, none of that matters, because I have a garden that I'm working on. I have a new painting that I'm going to paint. I'm going to do a 5x5 release of forgiveness. There's all sorts of ways to deal with the present when I stay here. All options are then open, and I don't force myself to move through fear or through attachment. I'm not saying that's how I am.
Yeah.
That's what I strive for.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll still get my monthly case of the PLMs.
Sorry. Could you explain to the listeners the 15 that there will be, what the PLMs are? Because this is a thing that I have used in our house ever since you have told me about it. It happened to me last week, and I even told Leandro about it, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. So if you could just enlighten the listeners real quick.
Okay, first of all, much honor to my sisters and aunties. This in no way is to lessen what you go through, but like some women have before their moon PMS. Well, as a man, I seem to have something around the new moon that comes out as PLM, which is a couple of days where I run around with the poor little me's. And I'll find myself kind of whiny and bitchy and salty. And I just determined it's the PLMs that I get during the new moon. So my moon comes with the new one, and so do the PLMs. So beware around me during a new moon.
So, sorry to cut you off like
No.
that. I'm hopefully we can find the train of thought, and if not, that's fine.
No, that's good.
But yeah, I just had to. And that's something where if you're a guy and you say, "Oh, I don't get that," I'm sorry, you're a liar. Everyone gets it. It's just a thing. Every guy I've met has had it, whether they want to admit it or not. Anyway,
All right, ladies. So now you have a new way to respond when we're being assholes.
Yep.
Just ask
go.
if we're PLMing and leave the room.
And if they don't know what it is, explain it to them and say that's brought to you by Uncle Todd.
No, don't throw me under the bus. No, I don't like being under the bus.
One thing, so sorry, it sparked my interest, and I want to make a mental note to go back to it. You said you're painting a 5x5. Sorry, you said you're doing a 5x5 painting, and it's a forgiveness painting.
Yeah, it's more of a release. When I paint the large canvases, I got destroyed in the fire. I had some large ones. I had Golf in the Kingdom. I had Passion. I had Addiction. All sorts of different titles. So I'll meditate on that topic or subject for half hour, and then, oh sure, I'll hit the joint. Thanks. And then I'll go ahead and I take the paints out and I line them up, and I don't use brushes, and I release that emotion, that thought pattern, that feeling onto the canvas, and I won't stop painting until it's complete.
Wow.
And for the smaller ones, sometimes that's an hour. For the larger ones, it's run up to 3 solid days before.
And that's 3 solid days of pain or meditating on that?
Painting with no sleep.
Wow.
Because I can't stop until it's released.
How long do you meditate on that feeling, emotion?
Until I hit that altered state.
Okay.
Somebody videoed me one time painting, and I told them I never wanted to see that again, because through the meditation, and it's not painting so much as it's a release ceremony through art.
Very cool.
I can do other things, but I prefer doing those. They have more meaning, and to the people that they speak to, that's who the paintings go to. They don't go to galleries, but when friends or family or friends of friends sees them and it speaks to them, then they get those.
I like that.
So it's been an interesting process. So my paintings are hung all over the planet now. One story that I like about painting is up in Del Norte Redwoods up in Northern California camping, with a campsite next to a fairy ring of redwoods.
Okay.
And I was release painting because I use a brush maybe to spin it or throw paint with it, but I had done a painting of the fairy rings.
Okay.
This beautiful thing with the fairy rings and the redwoods and the greens and the browns and all the colors. And the people came who were going to be camping in that site and in the fairy ring a day early at another site, and they told me the couple was getting married in that fairy ring the day after I was leaving.
Oh, wow.
And so I showed them the painting, and they wanted it. I was going to give it to them, but they wanted to pay me for it. Out camping, you don't have a lot of money, so they went through the group, and I believe they collected $54.27. And I gave a painting, and they were going to give it to the couple for their wedding gift.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And things like that occur when I paint, so it's a lot of fun. It's also really messy, so I have to have usually outdoor space to paint.
Oh, okay.
But that's one kind of form of release.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Just getting to a point where you're in the zone and literally, I guess you could say, saturated with that feeling, that energy that's produced, and then releasing that energy in a creative way is really beautiful. And I love that it's almost in the form of like energetic therapy in a way. It's cleansing your energy with that. You're putting all that on the canvas, and it's not for like, oh, I'm gonna, like you just said, like you'll see your paintings all over the world, but you won't see them in any art galleries.
Right.
And I really like that, because it speaks to doing it for the sake of doing it, because this is something that you feel, this is something that you get something out of and that you want to do regardless of anything else.
And hopefully that feeling helps teach me how to stay present with the rest of my life. Things seem to go, as far as change and adaptation and release and non-attachment and all of that, things tend to go in quite a squiggly line. It's just kind of roller coastering around as to how my acceptance that day is, so I try to keep the touchstones of staying present. Also, with all the different brain damage I've had, it's essential that I stay present, or I will get lost in a past that I know is not reality, or I'll go to a future that I know is unknowable. A friend of mine posted something today, and who 5 years ago would have known where they'd be at and what would be happening right now? And there's no time in my life that I can think of 5 years beforehand where I pegged exactly what was going to be happening 5 years from them.
Yeah, right.
So my best efforts are put in staying present and dealing with it. And I have to find all sorts of mechanisms, any mechanism that works for an individual to do that. I have different things I do, but for each person, like in the healing work that I do, I help people to understand that they are their own healer, because who knows better than your own person how to heal yourself and how to deal with those things. They've just been obscured by the programming that we've been given societally and by our parents, and adopting belief systems that aren't true to our core. And as I wash those patterns away, I can become more and more present. If you go to these healers, a lot of them will create cathartic events. And what I mean by that is, let's say some of the old Gestalt that really went in the wrong way, where they would beat the pillow to release the emotion or the anger that they had toward whatever, father, mommy, society, it didn't matter. They'd beat on the pillow until they'd be crying, and they'd have this cathartic event, this big emotional explosion. But what that actually does is it deepens the pathway in the brain that trauma, that thought pattern travels, and ingrains it more deeply into you. Because when we have a visual stimulation that would say trigger a PTSD or any sort of stress, although it comes in first, the brain doesn't acknowledge it first. The body does. From the loop, it comes with the brain. So the body reacts, and then the brain catches that at the same moment it catches the trauma thought, and it begins the loop of the continuing PTSD or trauma. The cathartic event, for a couple of months, you'll feel pretty good because you had, just you vomited out hugely. You'd feel good. A couple of months after that, you start feeling not so good because the pattern hasn't actually changed, and they teach you that it's your fault because you haven't done it right. So you go pay them again to have another cathartic event. So people repeatedly pay healers for cathartic events instead of having the healers teach them how to heal themselves. And it keeps them from also being present, because without washing away those patterns, with always being triggered by the outside from old patterns, I can never really achieve presence.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you get when you do something like that, you get stuck in this moment of, like, almost like I feel like you get, like, through some forms of meditation, whatever method that be, where you can just go, ooh.
Coconut frond just fell off the tree.
As I've said before, woohoo! People, we are in Hawaii. You will hear a bunch of sounds throughout the entirety of this podcast series, whether it be horny cats, people working on houses, or trees falling, or palm fronds falling.
The geckos are. It's springtime. The geckos are in full bloom. They're in mating runs all over the yard.
Oh yeah, same at my house. I actually saw that right before I came here.
I used to watch lizards, now I watch geckos. Different beach, same ocean.
Yeah, so for me it was the squirrels. But yeah, I feel like you get, like, almost like where I get, like, through some forms of meditation where, like, okay, something's bothering me today, I'm going to sit here and meditate on it, and then almost breathing through and just being like, okay, that's the thing that happened, that's not the present. And just almost like you said, like, washing away with it, where, if you're beating a pillow and crying about it, you're really, yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. You're really just pounding that method of whatever it be into you as you're pounding into the pillow, and
the neurological research backs up that. That's where I came up with all of it. It wasn't my idea that it travels the same pathway. That's neurobiologists who discovered that.
No, and that makes sense. It's one of those things where it's like, thankfully my mom had this methodology where she never understood why you would hate your kid for hating another kid, because all you're teaching them is hitting. You're not teaching them anything like, hey, you shouldn't do that, this and that, and so it's reinforcing, that negative pathway. My tennis coach in high school used to say it perfectly. He said, people say practice makes perfect. That is not true. Practice makes permanent.
But your mom's a good example of someone helping to break those patterns, that more people should be doing, using logical criteria. I think it's Scott Peck in his first book mentions that when we're 3 years old and the adults are these giants, that they are, to our perception, God.
Yeah.
So the way they behave and the way they treat us is adopted by our personalities, whether we choose it or not.
Yeah.
And we can change those. I can change them for myself. Not so much sitting in meditation and letting it pass and releasing the attachment. That's a good path, but that can be time consuming and slow.
Yeah.
What I found that works for people, and my friend Craig developed this and then I helped him with it, is to go back to that situation as observer and look at everything that's happening, so that you widen out the memory from just the traumatic part to even something so small as, was there a door in the room? Was it inside or outside? Well, who else was in the room? What color was the anything? And then you widen that memory to what I call the totality of reality. Then when that trigger comes, the thought now moves in a different pathway in the brain and doesn't trigger the body and cause the trauma loop.
That's really interesting.
If you change, you can't cover up your beliefs. You can't pour golden nectars over them and make it all okay. Mm-hmm. You can't put a golden light on it. You can't say, oh, it was a lesson I made up for myself. What you can do is look at what the totality of it was, stop the traumatic loop, and then do the work you need to do on the pattern without it causing you more harm.
You know, it's really crazy that you say that, because that's exactly what my mom strived to work on, is exactly that. It's so funny that you mention looking up at your parents and seeing as their God, because I remember that exact feeling being probably 4 or 5 or something like that, and doing that. And then I think one of the greatest things that my mom did is, as I grew up, at appropriate time periods, she was like, yo, I was human at this point, I've done that. I remember getting caught shoplifting when I was 15. And then she looked at me and she's like, so why'd you do it? And I was like, I have no idea. She's like, okay. And I'm like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, I understand that. And I'm like, you're not going to harp on me? She's like, no, I got caught shoplifting when I was a kid, your age. She's like, and I didn't know why I did it. And she's like, and my dad just hounded me for days upon days on why I did it, and I really had no idea why I did it, and it didn't do any good. So, but
that's why
people need to do that, and I think it's so easy not to do that it's, just like a lot of things, it's a lot easier to not try and build your own garden and just go to the it's people want to put in that work and that time, and some people don't have that time and energy, be it that they work a slaving 9 to 5 or whatever have you, but trying to find somewhere that you can put in to do that work for yourself, if not for anyone else. And
most important is what your mom's doing. I think the Buddhists say it right, when what we all have in common is we want to be free from pain and suffering. And if you look at things from that direction, doing the work for adults and changing our trauma to something that's handleable and patterns we can deal with has some effect, but in my vision, we will have no effect. And I hate to be so blunt, but we will have no effective change on this planet until we stop beating and raping the children. Yeah. And that has to be what we do when we break our own patterns, is we have to make sure that continues to others, and that we stop this pattern of abuse that children are raised with all over the planet. Yep. If we don't do that, they'll have to be doing the same type of work if they can find it. And the patterns of war, violence, distrust, and inhumane treatment of our fellow man will wash away, not through us, but through our children and our children's children, who can truly make the change if we treat them as the precious object, as the precious teachers that they are.
Wow. Could not have said it better. And, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was listening to a podcast like I normally do, especially during quarantine, where a comedian makes a joke where he walks up to a dad and he goes oh man, having a kid's changed me so much, this and that, I'm more compassionate, I see people a different way and this and that. The dad goes, no, I haven't really changed at all. And then he looks at the dad and he goes, which one's your kid? I don't know if I want to see which one's your kid, because you definitely should have changed from having a kid. But it teaches you, I think, or at least it should, they are teachers. They do teach you things without you even knowing, and I feel like you can get that if you work with kids. I've done like Boys and Girls Club and stuff like that and seen that, but I can't even imagine what it's like when you have your own kid. I mean, they just probably show sides of you, things, and they need to be viewed more as that versus
a nice example of how kids can teach you without meaning to is, for me, my oldest son was sick when he was very young. My oldest son, DJ from Earth, and I picked him up, and it was funny because his verbiage wasn't too good yet, and he said, Daddy, I feel like floating up. I said, floating up while you're sick? I said, that might be a good idea, go ahead. And so, a foot away from me, he projectile vomited all over me. So I picked him up and we went into the shower and started washing him off, and then he let loose with diarrhea all over me. There's no greater teacher of love and compassion than being covered in the vomit and feces of a child that you truly love. And if you don't, and a lot of people don't or can't learn those lessons, even those hidden ones from the children, you continue to perpetuate whatever your parents did to you, that their grandparents did to them, that you continue without thought and justify it because you think you're now a good person. So it's okay to do what was done to you.
Yes. That
you turned out just fine.
Versus looking at yourself objectively and being, oh, yeah, maybe it wasn't cool that XYZ or whatever happened, and looking at that in terms of, okay, how did that make me feel? How can I make it so that this doesn't, that I don't project that feeling onto them? Like, I remember I have terrible handwriting. I never write things down at the tin shack. I always have someone else take the order or I take my time and write it. But my mom never really hounded me on it. She always wanted me to practice for my own sake, but she didn't have, because she had terrible handwriting as a kid for a different reason, and her dad made her practice 3 hours a day, or 6 hours a week, or whatever it was, some stupid amount of time, her handwriting.
The hours I spent making my loops to learn cursive has turned into probably the most useless skill around, unless you want to use it to read something from the past. Everybody uses their keyboards right now, and handwriting has turned into everybody now signs their name like a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another thing that my mom saw. She's like, okay, he likes math and science. He's definitely not going to be a writer, so I'm not too concerned in this case. I'm pretty much just going to focus on, his skills and try to work on those and make sure that the weaknesses don't fall, too far behind. But as she also saw, no one's going to be freaking handwriting anything. Like, this isn't when I was in school. But it's astonishing, those things. And, like, again, with cursive, I was terrible at cursive. She never really hounded me on it because she also knew that after 3rd grade, no one uses cursive. And versus being like, well, my parents hounded me about this, so now it's almost like I get to hound you about this because this happened to me. And I feel like that's another loop that some parents can get into almost.
Yeah, but see, it was okay that the nuns would beat my knuckles with the ruler if I wasn't doing it right, because I turned out just fine.
Oh my God.
That's the myth that people live under that has to be broken. What can you imagine if with, let's just use a simple one, spanking.
Yeah.
Okay, spanking. First of all, you're 5 times the size of the person you're hitting.
Yeah.
Number 2, because you turned out fine because you got spanked, imagine how much more you could be now without having to accept that abuse as love. Imagine how things would change if the things that you say and can recognize weren't right, but I'm fine now, can you imagine if all of those things were taken away? If you weren't beaten, if you weren't yelled at with sarcasm, if you weren't called names, and all of these things come slowly to me. I'm slow, not stupid, but it was I think I was 7 years into sobriety, and I was raised in a good drinking Irish Catholic family, so sarcasm is a basic form of communication.
Mm-hmm.
I was out golfing with a group of friends of mine, none of us great golfers, just more fun to get together and swing, and we're on a tee, and I made a sarcastic joke about one of my friend's wives, and his face was crestfallen, and it looked like he was devastated. And I had been raised that sarcasm, which means ripping of the flesh, was loving. And this man was not raised with that and had a much gentler soul. And that was when I realized I had been using that against my children. And I had to sit down with them and explain to them what I'd been doing and how it was wrong and apologize to them and hopefully help them to break that cycle. The goal, I believe, of parenting, and I believe I was successful, is to raise humans who are better than you.
I would completely agree with that.
And with that in mind, how could you beat them? How could you rape them? How could you not feed them, chain them up, all the terrible things people do to children, not even getting into the institutionalized lies that they call history at school.
Yeah.
You know, it would, unless that, if we don't use our own increasing self-awareness as a planet also, all of the crap that's going on with the governments and the control and the rules and everything has been going on for a long time in subtler ways. It's just now that we have a president who has an unfiltered mouth and has brought all of that shadow to light because he believes that's the normal operating system we should all be in. It's not that things are getting worse. It's that more people are noticing it. And if we can notice it as adults and make the changes we need, and then definitely make the changes with the children, we can affect change within a couple generations. Otherwise, we will continue this until we blow ourselves up. That's the inevitable end of teaching violence to violence to violence.
Yep. I really am excited for the kids that are being born now. I want to, by hopefully more loving and compassion people, because I feel like there is this self-awakening that's becoming people want to call it a trend, that's fine, but for some people it's a real thing. I'm really excited to see, hopefully I'm still around when they're old enough to hopefully be able to start hopefully just making some serious change and policy changes. Like one thing that we first talked about that we both see eye to eye on is, okay, so George Washington served 2 terms because he did not believe that we should have a monarchy, and that if he kept being president, it could easily very well turn into a monarchy. But, and then after, I think it was FDR, we made the 2-term rule, so, you know, we didn't have almost 12 years of, you know, a president again. But yet, we have congressmen, like I think it was John Quincy Adams, who died in the Senate or Congress, can't remember which one, that are, it's their career. Like, you go on their Twitter, you go on their Facebook, and it's career politician. And it's just, like, how, like, it should be, I don't understand how when you get to higher end government, it starts becoming this big, huge thing where, like, I know city councilmen back home. You know what I mean? And they see it as, like, a civil service, it's not a career. They get paid a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I think that Congress and Senate should be the same way, just like you should have terms with it, because otherwise you have these career politicians that get stuck in this corporocracy that we have, where really we're just run by 6 corporations, 5 corporations. You know?
Yeah, they own 95% all media outlets.
And so you just get stuck in this loop, and I don't understand how it's okay to be civil servant at the bottom, but the second you set foot in Senate, you know, whatever, it just blows my mind. But that's, you know.
Well, there's a quote that I always liked that was on the side of the county building down in San Diego that said, the noblest motive is the public good. The problem that I see with politics right now and the politicians is what happens is in the quest for re-election, they allow themselves to be bought. The Supreme Court has changed. They no longer make sense to me, actually, on legal precedents. They decided in Citizens United that freedom of speech is money and how you spend it. So corporations can give unlimited amounts of money to political action committees, specifically for candidates. So you know, if Monsanto has given your campaign $4 million and you got elected, once you're elected, you're going to do what Monsanto wants you to do. They've also working on, and believe they're changing, they had the insider trading laws. Oh my God. So that if you were elected to Congress or Senate, in your hearings, if you would hear that a company was going to go bankrupt, you could short that stock, you could sell the stock, you can profit. So everyone, at some point, even Bernie Sanders ended up writing a book that made him a lot of money. And he was one of the last holdouts. If you become a senator or congressman, no matter what financial circumstances you find yourselves in, and we'll find out about AOC and how long she stays clear to the progressive revolution, but it's a path to riches. They all leave as millionaires when they leave office, and that's why they will never get approved through the Congress, Senate, and the President right now, any sort of limitations on that. In fact, the Supreme Court has gotten so wacky. Yesterday, they ruled that the Democrats in the House and Senate cannot have access to the unredacted Mueller report. The Supreme Court is blocking access for the Congress and Senate to a report that they were supposed to make a decision about impeachment on. It's mind-blowing. And the whole thing between, the idea is one man, one vote in the federal republic. If money changes that, that means one man with a lot of money is worth more than your vote.
Yep.
And that's just pure bullshit.
Yep. No, I remember thinking this when I first took the U.S. history, whatever you do when you figure out that they didn't say this obviously because school institution, I like to call it do you want me to pause it real quick?
No.
Oh, okay. I like to call it the babysitting.
We were searching for more kava.
I like to call it the babysitting institution because it makes no sense on why it has to be open from 8 to 3, except for that pretty much covers the time that most 8 people are at their 8 to 5 job, and then they do daycare afterwards. But
well, that's the perfect growth because Horace Mann began the current public education system to help advance the efficiency of corporations by teaching people to read and write. Mm-hmm. So schools have always been and continue to be simply a training ground for workers.
Yep.
Not a place of knowledge, self-knowledge, learning. There's no classes on gardening. There's no classes on banking. There's no classes on anything that you actually do during the day. But they train you to submit, believe the lies, and shut up.
And so it's funny that you say banking, because there was a class that my high school offered called money management, but it was for seniors who were failing math that couldn't pass like algebra 2, and I was like, hold on, wait. So I have to take AP Calculus because I want to go to college. But if I want to figure out how to balance a checkbook, I have to basically barely graduate high school. Like it just ain't made no sense to me. And I and I think that this was because of my upbringing and with my mom. I always looked at school as a place where I could try to learn, and if nothing, learn how to learn. And then from there, I can go out and acquire my own knowledge and whatever that be, whatever it be, gardening. And I also think that this idea of college, this idea that high school promotes that that every person should go to college. Look, people, I'm going to tell you this right now. College, this is after paying stupid amounts of money. College is a place where if you do it right, the best thing you learn is how to learn and how to teach yourself. All the classes, all the other thing is all bullshit. It's all lies. Doesn't help you get a job. Doesn't help you do this. You can get a much better job knowing connections than you can with a freaking college degree. It's teaching you how to learn, and that is what school.
Small jar in the fridge.
School should be a place where it teaches you how to learn. It teaches you how to, if you want to go out and be a gardener, okay, this is how you're going to do it. And
Ivan Illich wrote a book, late 60s, early 70s, called Deschooling Society, where he talked about how the education would be better set if there were different tracks for people. There's people who know when they're 15 or 16 what they want to do or study. They may want to be a mechanic. They may want to be a painter. Whatever.
Yeah.
And that you have different tracks. And there are those people that want to go to college to get advanced degrees in different things. But you have the society, the schooling set up, so those different tracks are possible.
Yeah.
So you would have basically all in one. You would have a college prep school with a trade school with all sorts of other types, and you wouldn't try to teach everybody the same tract of misstarted history, so that they can go on to maybe get a degree in a field of study that they can actually get a job in.
Yep.
And I really, if you can ever read it, it's Ivan Illich, ILLIVCH, I think, but it's Deschooling Society, and he's got a great layout for exactly what you're talking about.
I don't know if one of the German politicians has read that book, but I took 4 years of German. I took 3 years because I was able to actually go to Germany. It was a fight with my mother. She was like, you should take Spanish. You live in Southern California. I'm like, look, when I can go to Mexico or Spain for a month in the summer, you let me know. I'll jump on it. So I took German, and one thing he said is that that's exactly what they have in Germany. Around 5th grade, you take this test that has to do with your interests, English, math level skills, some other bullshit. But what it does is it puts you in a gymnasium, which is more for like if you want to go to university, that kind of stuff. They have a Realschule, which is like trade school, things of that nature. And they have a Hauptschule, which unfortunately, and this is the nature of the beast, because Germany has a lot of immigrants that come from Turkey. A lot of the Turkish immigrants get put there just because they don't know German, which isn't necessarily a good viewing point because they could still go to university or go to trade school or whatever. But it's kind of similar to, what you said. And I've always said, I think I was maybe 14 when I first heard that. And I was like, that makes way more sense than what the fuck we're doing, And I remember, telling Mom, like, I'm in a college prep class. And she's like, oh, really? Because when she was in high school, college prep was like honors now, and then there was advanced placement. Now it's college prep is for every person because every person's meant to go to college, and then if you actually want to be with people that actually also want to be at school and learn and stuff like that, you got to be in an honors or an AP class. So it's just gotten to this point where you can't find a middle.
No, the whole education is tilted towards getting people to accept the corporate capitalism model of business, so that they will go along with whatever they're told because they believe the myths that were taught as history. It took all the races to build these cultures.
Yep.
All of them working together, and it will take all of us working together to affect the change of those systems to a more humanist system, to a more bottom-up approach where people actually have a voice instead of the corporation hollering so loud that they drown everyone out.
Yeah.
You know, there's examples here on this island and in Big Sur. In Big Sur, they just put up a surveillance tower with a 25-mile range camera to supposedly look at the oceans 25 miles out. Well, our territorial waters only go 12 miles. Oh, it's interesting why they do that and what the actual purpose is. And then here on the island, we have a misnamed geothermal power plant called PGV. There's geothermal all over the planet. This is the only plant on the planet that is an injection well, which it's not the word fracking because they're not going for oil, but it's exactly the same process. You can look it up online and see their diagrams. They're injecting materials that they don't have to name, but we know one of them is pentane, because during the eruption they had to move enough pentane to blow Puna off the map. And they're injecting these chemicals and pentane, the explosive gas, down these wells into the magma of the East Rift Zone and harvesting the power of the explosions. The eruptions, and I'm not saying they're connected at all, I'm just telling you the location where they decided to put this thing in, is less than a half a mile from where the fissures began. That sort of school training to believe that business and authorities are always right and looking out for your best interest.
It's not.
And then they use names to cover up what they're actually doing. After the eruption over here in the Ohia Forest, in the land right before the preserve, while the eruption was still going on, they took D5s in their big giant machines and completely destroyed the entire forest and planted GMO papayas. And in the middle of the neighborhood, right next to a school, downwind of the emissions from PGV, I went one day to see what they were spraying. In the back of the truck was all unlabeled big jars, jugs of different chemicals that they're spraying. And they've got GMO crops growing right around the corner without notification to the neighbors, without notification to anyone what they're doing.
You know, and folks, it's not just like, I mean, that happens in
that happens everywhere. These are just two small examples in two places. It's happening in your neighborhood.
Oh, it does. For everyone in Ventura, California, look up Oxnard City. It's a super PAC site, and they wanted to build another fossil fuel based power plant. And luckily, the people were able to say no. But all the crops that you get there, along Camarillo, along Lewis Road, it's unbelievable, man. They're spraying pesticides and all this stuff, and all the Oxnard High School track people have to run through it. All the farm people, it's happening everywhere. And for people, especially people in California, who, let's be honest, I'll say this being from California, especially from Southern California, have this hoity-toity attitude of not in my neighborhood. No, it is in your neighborhood. It's in everyone's neighborhood because they don't care. One thing, ADHD moment, I love it. One thing that I was going to say, especially with this corporocracy, is I never understood how you have this many people in this country. This many people vote for this person. This many people vote for this person. The person that gets the most votes is elected.
No, that's not how it happens.
No. Because, at least in my lifetime, there's two people that it had the exact opposites happened. And we have this idea of this electoral college that is archaic, if best. But it's so that it's also these corporations can just keep doing what they're doing, and you know,
and it goes to the lack. It kind of all goes back to education. I mean, some friends and I took a while to come up with a true definition of universal common sense. You know, it started out with things like, well, don't cross the street when a car is coming. Well, that in some countries may, you know, all things are different countries, but universally, I think common sense is simply the ability to think without direction and act without harming yourselves or others.
Yeah.
So, as an example, here on this island, people are spraying glyphosate, Roundup. They're spraying it in their yards as weed killer. Instead of using the simple saltwater vinegar mix that's just as effective, they're leaching poisons, known carcinogenic poisons, into our water system and into the ocean and the fish that feed us in the ocean. It's because they believe an ad, this will kill your weeds. Yep. And they are so bombarded with those messages and their belief that those messages are true, yep, that they will not think for themselves.
No.
And salt water and vinegar will take care of your weed problem. Why go spend all that money to get something that is known toxic to poison our island paradise?
Yep.
And it's a lack of common sense.
I remember taking my sustainable agriculture class, and we had to do a garden bed experiment. And like an idiot, I asked them, like, oh, what are we going to do for weeds? I was like, well, we're definitely not spraying Roundup. He's like, and there's some, you know, organic things. I think you mentioned, you know, the salt water and vinegar. And he's like, but you got 2 weed killers right here. And he showed up, and he showed up his hands. Yep. And for a garden bed, that, you know, that works. If you have a 3, 5, 6 acre property, that doesn't work out very well. Even a 1/4 acre property, it gets out of hand. But it just goes to, and that just showed my ignorance in thinking of, well, I've always seen ads for, you know, weed killers. Why don't we just use like one of those? And I honestly loved it. I loved it that, you know, twice a week, 3 times a week, I had to go out to my garden bed and make sure that I pulled all the weeds out so it wasn't affecting things.
Yeah, well, I'm late right now because over on that section of the fence, I hand pull all those. I have to hand pull all the grasses that are growing up among the tea plants and the cherry tree and the mulberry tree and the papaya. And there's something really grounding about getting down on your hands and knees. And I'm a little funny this way, but I apologize to them and let the rest of everything around it know that it's just a haircut I'm giving it. And so I'm the barber of my farm.
No, I feel that our friends James and Ryan, they were like, hey everyone, you know, if you have any time, me and Ryan are going to do some work on the garden. So I had like an hour before our D&D session, so I decided to go out there and help them. And there was this avocado tree, and all these vines were around it. And I was like talking to the avocado tree. I'm like, I'm not gonna hurt you. I know you probably like these guys, but like they need to come up so you can like start producing avocados and stuff. And like Ryan did a great job afterwards. But like we were able to like get to a point before I left where like all the vines were away from the avocado tree. And me and Leandro were doing it today with our cacao tree. We were trying to get that big vine that's overgrown on it, and we were like talking to the cacao tree like, it's okay, we're not trying to hurt you, we're just getting especially with I mean all plant life, but like with fruits and flowers, and you gotta talk to them and be like, it's okay, don't get shocked, you're fine.
I probably talked to them too much because during the stay-at-home orders, I've been lucky enough to be stuck with the permaculture goddess Rebecca, who is designing and helping with the beds and showing them the love and getting me going in the right direction. So here at the beet farmer, or the beet farm, in honor of the beet farmers, bless you country dick, you always wanted to retire to the beet farm, and I have.
And there's beets with bongos.
And there's drumming, and there's life going on. There's drumming, there's music, there's kava.
There's a community.
There's community which has gotten smaller and larger at the same time because you're not out in public with people you don't know, but you're with people that because you've only seen them out in public with a lot going on, you haven't got to know them as well.
Yeah.
So it's really a good time right now, locked down, to think about those changes, to think about gardening, to think about how we should be treating the children to actually affect change, and to build community and get to know the people that you know and care about at a deeper level.
Yeah.
We have time now for those long conversations with kava, a joint.
Yeah.
You know,
No, absolutely.
and we can sit and talk and learn more about each other, and everybody can do this.
And that's and that was my goal with this. I mean, ever since I first came here and I started to get to know people, we're gonna have to cut this short.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, no, that's why I wanted to start to do this. And for people that were excited about hearing about Rebecca, she will be on another podcast. So, Uncle Todd, thank you so much for being on here.
Ryan, thanks for hanging on the lanai.
No problem. Everyone, this is Same Ocean, Different Beach.